what is true is that sometimes the changes that we're going to need to make are hard to make because slavery has become normal. We don't know any different. We have had the status quo, so to speak, of medicating ourselves or searching for false idols. We have practiced lifestyles that, in a way, in other words, they have become what's normal for us. And there are people who would rather exist with normal or the status quo, even if it's killing them, than they would make the changes necessary to get well.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. Today we're going to begin a 3-part legacy podcast featuring Dr. Mark Laaser. The name of this series is going to be The Journey of Recovery. This takes us back in time to when Mark and I were conducting the Men of Valor program, which is the first version of the Faithful and True podcast. Here now is Dr. Mark Laaser and The Journey of Recovery.
Today, Randy, we're faced with moving on to a new series that I'd like to initiate. It's going to be a shorter series, and the title of it is The Journey of Recovery.
The Journey of Recovery. It has a ring to it. I like it.
Well, as long as we all like it. But it is related to one of our most frequently asked questions when people come here and they're initiating their recovery journey around sexual sin and sexual addiction. The question really is, how long is it going to take me to get free of this? How long is it going to take my wife to trust me again? I mean, there's all kind of related questions, but it's really all about how people change, how people go on the journey, both as individuals and also as a couple. And there's been some actual research about this that, I'll be kind of referring to along the way. But basically, I want to talk about the idea that I think is a very basic and essential Christian idea, that our Christian walk with the Lord is, in fact, a journey. And it's a journey to grow ever closer to Him. And I think we need to see it as a journey, because sometimes people tend to think that there's a beginning and an end. There's a final destination. And we should get there like overnight.
Well, it's a hurry up and get well.
That's right.
And that's really hard to try to imagine. I can see the powerfulness of such a series, because I'm sure that I'm not surprised to hear that it's one of the most commonly asked questions, because by the time that an individual has been devastated by sexual sin, they have identified the need to make this change in their life,
right.
Their need to reestablish a healthy and intimate marriage,
right?
And yet at the same time, there's such an uneasiness of experiencing that pain that you want the pain over as soon as possible.
To go away.
Yeah, please make this go away.
Yeah, and I would really like to ground this in one of my favorite stories since I was a boy, and that is the story of the Exodus of the Jewish people out of bondage or slavery in Egypt. And I'd like to make some parallels between that experience and what we go through when we're in recovery for, let's just say, any addiction or any problem.
Right.
Okay. One of the first things to think about, I think, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more extensively in terms of biblical background than I sometimes do on the show, but one of the questions we need to ask is, how did the Jews get into Egyptian slavery in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that goes back to the story of Joseph, and how we all know the story of the sibling rivalry and his brothers selling him into slavery, and he wound up in slavery down in Egypt. And, we know the story of how he eventually interpreted dreams, including Pharaoh's, and wound up second in command of Pharaoh. And as a result of one of his dream interpretations, predicted a famine in the land and made provision for that. So that's kind of part of the background. So the parallel there is, I think, that how did the Jews get down to Egypt in the first place? They came looking for food. And we have that great story of the very brothers who had sold their own brother into slavery, now coming on their knees, in front of their brother to get food. Otherwise, they were going to starve to death. And the parallel there to me is that addiction starts when we are hungry, when we are needy, when we go searching for something to fill our hunger. And I think we all need to remember that one of the root causes of addiction is because we are lonely, we are isolated, we don't have the resources that we need, and at times we go perhaps even looking in the wrong places, to get some of those needs met. But that's how the whole situation starts. And of course we know that the Jews, a lot of them moved down to Egypt. It was a friendlier time then. And then, of course, the Bible tells us eventually there was a Pharaoh who did not remember Joseph, and the Jews were getting too numerous, and so the Pharaoh decided to turn them all into slaves. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is a really great picture of the spiritual warfare that's out there, that we can take something that was a legitimate need in the first place, and if we go looking in the wrong places, and then Satan gets involved in this, it's going to turn into a bondage, and that's what addiction is really all about. It's bondage. So, are you with me so far?
Yeah, so far I'm locked into the story. I was waiting to hear what comes next, because as we have talked about in the past, mm-hmm. we know that Satan is a liar.
Yeah,
and we know that our destruction and of course our alienation from God is number one in his heart, is to cause that to happen.
That's right. So now we're going to look at the fact that the Jews had been in captivity for several hundred years by the time the change or the journey of the Exodus, the journey of recovery, is really going to start. And of course, one of the things that I think all of us that have needed to make these changes and come out of bondage, come out of slavery, come out of addiction, we have to look at is, how long were we in slavery in the first place? Because, what is true is that sometimes the changes that we're going to need to make are hard to make because slavery has become normal. And that's one of the concepts that I wanted to try to emphasize in this first show, is that sometimes change is hard because slavery has become normal. We don't know any different. We have had the status quo, so to speak, of medicating ourselves or searching for false idols. We have practiced lifestyles that, in a way, in other words, they have become what's normal for us. And there are people who would rather exist with normal or the status quo, even if it's killing them, than they would make the changes necessary to get well.
As I'm hearing you explain that, it makes me think of every form of addiction.
Every form of addiction.
Every form of addiction, it is just so much easier to stick with the norm, and whether the norm be someone's alcoholic tendencies or sexual addiction tendencies, it just would take an enormous amount of work in the eyes of the person living that life to stop what they're doing and to change their life.
Right. So I think one of the first elements of change, when we know we're going to come out of bondage or we have the opportunity, is that God will send somehow, some way, an opportunity, a messenger, new information. And we call it new information, meaning that we might not even been aware that what we were struggling with is in fact an addiction. That was certainly true for me when I know that one of my own clients brought in to my office the very first book written about sexual addiction. And at that point in time, I hadn't heard the term. Now, I was struggling with sexual addiction. I was in bondage. I was a slave to my own sexual sin, but I didn't necessarily have a word for it. I just knew that this was, part of my life and had been, ever since I was about 11 years old. So what I'm trying to teach here is that there are times when God will choose to intervene, and sometimes that is going to appear to us to be rather inconvenient. There's a consequence. There's a discovery of some sort. There's an explosion of information that gets us into all kind of trouble. I would like to have the listeners know that can be understood or reframed as a way that God, in fact, has chosen to intervene on the slavery that's in our life. And because of that, we should look at it as an opportunity to now go on the journey of recovery.
The way that you have created this vision from the words you've just shared with us, it to me made it so on target as I think of the 35 men that are going to walk in our front door tomorrow morning for our Men of Valor 3-day intensive workshop. Being prisoners in bondage is the perfect way to term the shame and the, all of that is on their shoulders and visible to the eye that's looking for it. I think that's the perfect way to put that. So to draw that correlation between being a prisoner, being in bondage, being at the mercy of the stronghold on you is very much like the men who, well, it's funny, as you're describing the word addiction, that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks of the men who call here asking questions about the workshop because they don't want to accept that term, label.
Yeah.
They are petrified at being labeled sex addict.
Right.
And we kind of go out of our way on the website saying that don't get hung up on the word addiction.
Right.
The word addiction, and you will say this much better than I, but it's any action that you continue to do that has negative or destructive repercussions in your life, and you're unable to stop.
So that sometimes is referred to, believe it or not, as, this is one of my favorite terms, the tyranny of the normal. So in other words, they don't even know in some cases that they are in as much bondage as they are. And the shame that they're feeling that you're describing is something that they just don't want to accept. But I am just saying journeys to get closer to God's will always begin with some kind of divine intervention. They begin with God exposing the truth, God exposing the lies that some of us still believe, and we should be thankful for that rather than just being completely frightened by it. But we'll see in the story of the Jews that they are, even though God is intervening, they are completely frightened by it. We're accepting the fact that God has made some kind of intervention in our life. God has exposed us and exposed the lie. So now we're kind of sitting at day 0 of the journey of recovery. And what do we do? In the story of the Jews that we've been referring to, we know that God sent what? He sent Moses and intervened, in fact, on Pharaoh. One of the things that I really find fascinating about this story is about how tyrannizing the status quo, the status of slavery can be. Because what happens in the story is Pharaoh finally relents and lets the people go, and they start marching, toward the promised land, and they get to this body of water, and they're standing on the edge of the Red Sea, and they're looking out over this expanse of impassable water, and they can hear the hoofbeats of Pharaoh, who's changed his mind and has come chasing after them. And what do they want to do at that point? After having seen the intervention of God a number of times in Egypt, do they have faith at this point? No, they don't. They basically, some of them say, let's just lay down and let's go back to Egypt. And I think that's part of the tyranny of the slavery and the bondage of addiction. Sometimes I think to some it seems so much, in a way, easier to go back to what we've known for so many years. So it's going to take a lot of faith to know that God can part the waters and take us on the next leg of the journey. And I've often wondered, as I think about the parallel to the story, here we have a body of water, and what is that comparable to in terms of what we're facing? And I think about it in terms of the tears that is going to be required. Recovery requires a lot of sadness. It requires getting in touch with our sorrow, getting in touch with our deep grief about things that happened to us, things that we have done, things that we have done to others. And there's going to be a lot of emotions that we have to face into. And so that is the parallel that I draw to take the next stage of the journey, to escape the land of slavery and to go on the journey. We're going to have to face into a lot of emotions, and we have to have the faith that God is going to walk with us in that and support us in that and never cause us to face into anything that we don't have the resources to deal with.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
As you approach your 29th anniversary of sobriety later this month, do you recall that moment?
Yes, I do. It occurred really at a number of times in the treatment process where, whether it was at the treatment center and the counseling center later on, I knew I faced into very painful memories, very painful life experiences, a lot of deep grieving around some things that I was not able to get when I was growing up. And yes, I can remember actually a number of moments when I just, really sought the faith to know that God was walking with me. And,
well, I just had this feeling that you knew how relevant what you just told us was, that I was interested to know if you remembered that moment in your story. And obviously you do.
Yeah, well, there are moments.
Yeah, plural. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, now the next part of the journey, and this is the one that I think bothers people the most, is the Jews, of course, get over into the desert, basically, and they're a ragtag group. They've never been organized or self-governed, and they've been slaves. All of them have known nothing other than slavery, and so now they're over there and they're wondering, what they're going to eat, what they're going to, do for water, and God, of course, provides, as we know in the story, manna from heaven and provides for their every need. But the parallel to the journey of recovery is that I think when we first start the journey and we're going to go into a place that is going to appear desert-like. We don't have the resources that we used to use to medicate our feelings, to get rid of emotions we did not want to have. We don't have all of these false idols that we're pursuing, and it's going to be. And one of the words that's primarily used for this first period of time is the word chaos. If we've taken away what has been normal and the way we've approached life and the way we've done things, now we're kind of in a place where we don't know what normal is. We don't know what the routine is supposed to be, and that's certainly the anxiety collectively, I think, that the Jewish people are experiencing in the story. And they get absolutely very frightened, because when Moses goes off to commune with God and eventually receive the Ten Commandments, what do they even want to do at that point? They want to build a new false idol, which they do. Now, this is the part of the recovery journey for the average addict that really takes place, according to the research, in the first year. The first year of our recovery, there's going to be, I don't know how else to say it, some desert-like times when there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of feelings and emotions that we're not used to experiencing. Hopefully sobriety is moving forward, and because we're getting more sober, we're allowing ourselves to feel things like we just talked about, and that can be a time of highs and lows. We sometimes describe this period of time as a kind of like a roller coaster ride. It's got its ups and its downs. There will be moments of great joy. There will be moments of great anger or sadness or desperation. And there's going to be a lot of times in this first part of the journey in the desert, where we don't think we're making progress.
I was just going to ask that. I'm sure that there's a stage there where you're uncertain that you're making progress.
That's right. And so we have to remember that we haven't seen the promised land. We don't know what it's like to be healthy, and we're just going to have to. And this is what I wanted to talk about as we close for this very first stage of the journey. This is where I think we really need to depend on community, people that have been on the journey ahead of us and maybe have seen the promised land and can describe it to us and model it to us in terms of the peaceful like feelings that it brings to know what it's like to be there. But I can't emphasize enough that in this first stage of the journey, in this chaotic desert-like time, we're going to need a tremendous amount of community.
Well, once again, it's back to your reoccurring theme of the importance of accountability and community. Right. What I see listening to you and trying to imagine that journey is what complicates it for those that struggle with sexual purity is that this is not a singular journey by yourself when you're a married individual, right, and you're trying to find salvation for not only yourself personally, but salvation for your marriage.
That's right. So we all need companions on the journey. And for those of us that are married, we talk about this journey at the couples workshop that we do. And we definitely want to encourage the couples to know that they can, in fact, be companions on this journey if they can see it for what it is. It's not something where the addict is going to all of a sudden get healed, get well, and everything is better, and now they don't have to think about it anymore. I think one of the things we're trying to emphasize in this show is that this first period of time is probably going to last up to a year, and it's not always going to feel that great during that year. It's going to be that roller coaster ride. If you are on this journey as a couple, be of good faith and support each other and get community for yourselves as a couple. I think that's a huge thing as well.
Thank you for being with us today on the Faithful and True podcast. This Legacy podcast gives us the opportunity to share the wisdom of Dr. Mark Laaser, the founder of Faithful and True. This is the first of 3 installments of this subject, the journey of recovery. We hope that this has been helpful and beneficial to you. If hearing this has opened your eyes to your need to reach out to Faithful and True for help, we're here for you. Visit faithfulandtrue.com For more information, for more resources, and for information and online registration for the Men's Journey Workshop. We hope that this information is beneficial to you and helpful to help you jumpstart your personal journey of recovery. Until then, we hope that the coming week will be a week for you that's filled with many blessings and with great vision.